December 3, 1984, at 12:05 p.m. A silent, invisible cloud poured from the Union Carbide plant in Bhopal, India, engulfing the city's bustling streets and exposing 500,000 people to a lethal cocktail of methyl isocyanate, turning an ordinary afternoon into one of the deadliest industrial disasters in human history. The story of Bhopal begins in the early 1970s, when the American chemical giant Union Carbide partnered with Indian firms to build a pesticide factory on the outskirts of the city. The plant was designed to produce 7, a widely used insecticide, and relied on large vats of methyl isocyanate, MIC, a highly volatile compound that can ignite or explode under the slightest change in temperature or pressure. In the years leading up to the tragedy, safety standards were compromised. Cost-cutting measures delayed the installation of critical refrigeration units, alarm systems were disabled, and the plant's emergency response plan remained a half-finished draft hidden in a filing cabinet. On that fateful December day, water entered one of the MIC storage tanks, an error that set off an exothermic reaction, causing the temperature inside the tank to skyrocket. The safety valve, meant to vent excess pressure, was either blocked or inoperative. Within minutes, the tank ruptured, releasing an estimated 40 metric tons of MIC gas into the atmosphere. The dense, white plume drifted downwind, slipping into homes, schools, and marketplaces, where people inhaled the toxic vapors before they even realized the danger. Eyewitnesses described the immediate horror: a choking sensation, burning eyes, and a sudden, overwhelming panic as the gas seeped through cracks in walls and under doors. Those with pre-existing respiratory conditions or children were hit hardest. Within hours, emergency rooms overflowed with victims suffering from severe pulmonary edema, blindness, and chemical burns. The official death toll released by the Indian government stands at 8,000, but independent estimates place the number of immediate fatalities between 5,000 and 8,000, with over 500,000 people suffering long-term health effects ranging from chronic respiratory disease to birth defects and cancers. The aftermath revealed a cascade of medical and legal challenges. Doctors on the front lines performed frantic autopsies, documenting the hallmark signs of MIC exposure: frothy fluid filling the lungs, severe inflammation of the trachea, and necrosis of the ocular surface. Toxicologists later identified that the gas's high solubility allowed it to penetrate deep into the alveolar sacs, binding to proteins and disrupting cellular respiration. In the weeks following the disaster, makeshift clinics sprung up across Bhopal, staffed by volunteers and overwhelmed by the sheer volume of patients. The Indian government, under pressure to act, set up the Bhopal Gas Relief and Rehabilitation (BGRR) program, but funding shortages and bureaucratic delays meant that many victims never received adequate treatment. Legal battles began almost immediately. Union Carbide's Indian subsidiary, Union Carbide India Limited (UCIL), faced accusations of gross negligence, environmental violations, and willful disregard for worker safety. In 1989, after protracted negotiations, the Indian government reached a settlement with Union Carbide, agreeing to a payment of $470 million, a figure many activists deemed a gross underestimation of the true cost. The settlement included a clause that barred further civil suits against the corporation, a provision that sparked outrage among survivors and human rights groups. The criminal trial, however, stalled. In 1994, 8 former UCIL officials were charged with culpable homicide not amounting to murder, but the case languished in the courts for years, hampered by procedural delays and the death of key witnesses. When the trial finally resumed in the early 2000s, it was dismissed on technicalities, leaving the victims with a lingering sense of injustice. Union Carbide was later acquired by Dow Chemical, which has consistently denied direct liability, stating that the settlement absolved the parent company of further responsibility. Autopsies performed on victims provided a grim, scientific chronicle of the tragedy's impact. Pathologists noted that the mic exposure caused acute pulmonary hemorrhage, leading to a characteristic white froth in the lungs, an indicator of fluid accumulation that suffocated the patient within minutes. The eyes, directly exposed to the gas, displayed corneal ulceration and irreversible blindness in many cases. Longitudinal studies have since linked the Bhopal exposure to increased rates of reproductive abnormalities, such as spontaneous abortions and congenital malformations, suggesting that mic's mutagenic properties persisted long after the initial inhalation. Decades later, the ghost of that December afternoon still haunts Bhopal. The original plant site remains a derelict, rust-covered structure, its foundations a stark reminder of the cost of industrial complacency. The surrounding community continues to grapple with contaminated groundwater, as leaks from the plant's storage tanks have polluted local wells with heavy metals and residual chemicals. Annual commemorations bring together survivors, activists, and journalists, each demanding accountability, adequate compensation, and a complete environmental cleanup. The Bhopal disaster reshaped global industrial safety standards. In its wake, the International Labor Organization, ILO, and the United Nations introduced stricter protocols for hazardous chemical handling, mandating emergency preparedness plans, community right-to-know legislation, and third-party safety audits for high-risk facilities. Corporations worldwide were forced to re-evaluate risk management, leading to the adoption of the process safety management framework that emphasizes prevention, detection, and rapid response. Yet, the tragedy also exposed the limits of regulation in developing nations, where economic pressures often override safety concerns, and where corporate influence can dilute enforcement. Today, as new generations walk past the rusted gates of the former Usul complex, the lessons of Bhopal remain urgent. Subscribe to the Autopsy Files for more stories like this.